Thompson Productions.
The problem with that is when you just wake up to the idea that your paradigm isn't true and then the official narrative isn't true, there is a knee-jerk reaction, an instinctive reaction, much like getting tossed into chaotic waters. You start scrambling for anything that looks like a flotation device or anything that looks like the truth.
I think a lot of these mass shootings are now like a modernized form of a lot more of kind of these sleeper cell Manchurian candidate types potentially being greenlit and activated in order to cause chaos and then provide a precedent-setting operation to their then passed legislation.
They don't value your life at all. And as a matter of fact, if it makes their psyop look more legitimate.
And that's where I just consistently find myself in this place where I'm restructuring my own paradigm of what I actually fundamentally view as being realistic and possible.
But every time I did, I just kept butting against some sort of spiritual, supernatural shit.
James Holmes looked like he transitioned into a different person. It was like the soul left his body and he was just a demon. Yeah, the pattern recognition just off the charts at this point, and I've described it recently just as a superpower because it does become that. It feels like that in certain ways. I think just through objectively pursuing that truth and being willing to be wrong and have an open mind and reflect on our ideas and admit when we have made mistakes, like it's very obvious that we're finding like-minded individuals who are proactively pursuing a life where they practice their principles on a daily basis.
We are being hypnotized by people like this. Newsreaders, politicians, teachers, lecturers. We are in a country and in a world that is being run by unbelievably sick people. The chasm between what we're told is going on and what is really going on is absolutely enormous.
Oh yeah, dude. There's some Nephilim shit.
It's like we all know what's going down, but no one's saying shit what happened to the home of the brave. These motherfuckers, they controlling us now, and no one's talking about how they made us fight and be slaves. And everybody's just walking around, head in the clouds and won't awaken to a dead in the grave. But then it's too late, we need to be ready to raise up. Welcome to the end of days.
Everybody is slaves, only some are aware that the government releasing poison in the air.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Nephilim Death Squad. I am David Lee Corbo, a.k.a. The Raven. That is Top Lobster, the father of disinformation. Before we get into today's guest, a little reminder that this is only a 30-minute preview. Sometime around the 30-minute mark, probably give or take 20 minutes, we're going to be going live exclusively to patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad, where you can continue enjoying the show, engaging with the live chat, and having an ad-free experience. You can do it all for free. Sign up for the 7-day free trial, absorb as much content as you possibly can, and then get out of there before the billing cycle kicks in. But you're going to want to stay because we keep making too much content to post on YouTube and Rumble and elsewhere. So we're really backlogged, and there's a bunch of shit waiting for you at patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. Also, guys, go to brogrove.com and pick up your tickets for the greatest event that anyone has ever seen or thrown on the face of the planet. Bro Grove 3, 2 days, 1 portal. Come see performances from NDS, Tower Gang, Shane Cashman, Owen Benjamin, and Sam Tripoli, plus a shit ton of other people that we're not going to announce. It's going to be a big surprise. There's going to be a lot of fun being had at Bohemian Grove this coming June. If you want to be there, get your tickets at brogrove.com. Yeah. All right. Joining us today is Austin. Austin has come back for the second time this week because we asked him to talk about something that turned out to be very detail heavy. And I thought this is an important topic. We should give it an extra episode, a part 2. And that topic is the Waco situation with the Davidians.
Yes.
However, before we even get into that conversation,
poorly
Austin,
managed
tell
our
us
time.
where we can find him.
Hey man, that is what I typically do, unfortunately, is I poorly manage my own time and fall down these various tangential rabbit holes where I find myself just kind of, I don't know, maybe that's why they call our show, right, as far as like the Schizo Bros, in terms of me and Jose kind of aligning and joining our forces together. But honestly, he more keeps me on track a little bit better than at times I'll find myself in that place where unfortunately I'm just like schizophrenic as hell.
Dude, can I tell you
And
though? Top
yeah.
does that same thing for me.
Mhm.
Top literally, if I did this episode, if I did a show by myself, I would just go on tangents and it'd be like, why is there even a guest? Why are you interviewing anybody? You don't let them
Yeah.
talk. So Top is actually here specifically. He is my handler. He's here to reel me
That's
in. He
so
was
funny.
sent straight by the state of Israel to tell me to shorten it up a little
Just
bit.
go,
So
be
I get it, dude.
careful with that one.
Sorry.
Right.
It's good.
Dude, when we went on tinfoil hat, like what was it, in February, I think. Not the last time, but the time before when we just talked about like Omar Mateen and the various like Psyops season, all the various kind of false flags that were happening at the time in terms of the Tesla right
Oh
blowing
yeah,
up
psyop season
outside
when
of
the
the
Tesla
Trump
blew
and
up.
then yeah, and the New Orleans terrorist attack. And and yeah, that was a very it was definitely a fun conversation, but I remember in the middle of that conversation, uh, obviously, it was funny because Jose had just mentioned the fact, like in passing, he had joked about being essentially being my handler, right? Because he could keep me on task, and was referring to my schizophrenic mind, and then Johnny jumps in and obviously he embraces the role of being Tripoli's handler. And
Mm.
so it just kind of like led to a funny moment within the conversation. But
It
then,
shows you,
of course,
Austin, that's the model. That's the model that works, is like a
right.
schizo and a handler, and if you could just put those 2 together, it's you make gold suddenly.
Right. But the hilarious part about that is, of course, you have consequences after the fact where people in the chat are like 100% sold that Jose is my handler. And I had someone even warn me, "Hey, don't don't forget he said it out loud. He admitted that he is your handler." And I'm like, "Oh my God." As if like Jose has been sent to infiltrate and like keep me off task and you know what I
You know
mean?
what
And
that is?
like
These so in the schizoverse, in the conspiracy community, people that absorb content, and this is kind of a little belief that I held on to for a while. Now I'm not too sure.
Mhm.
The saying goes, they have to tell you, and that's every time like some shady organization. What does that say? I can't even read it.
This is me. I just said because somebody called us the Nephilim experts. They were like, "You're not the Nephilim expert. I am." And I said, "Actually, we are. So reach out to our agent for booking." And then it was our agent. And then
That's right. That's right.
I
But within this community, whenever somebody shows you their hand,
Mm.
the audience screams like it's either revelation or the method, or the other one is they have to tell you. They have to tell you. So now it's like every time I'm near a brick wall, it's
Yeah.
like see, he has to tell you. And every time it's incredible. So I love that idea of not only how does it create lore for you guys, but I
Mhm.
love that when you're off the show, people are coming to you and they're like, look, this motherfucker already said it. Like he
He said
already
it
said
out
he's
loud.
listen.
controlling you. You
He
I
don't
know.
have to bend the knee to him. You can free yourself.
he
Speak the
actually
truth
might be a
without this
Fed.
handler.
If there was someone on Tower Gang that I had to pin as a Fed, it would be Jose. I'm just saying.
That's so funny. That
100%.
is hilarious. I
I
know,
legitimately believe that. I don't.
That's not even a suspicion. That's like everything short of confirmation.
hey, as far as everyone just fed jacketing each other on Twitter, like it is I mean, it's a phenomena at this point, and especially within this kind of like-minded community that we're residing in, right? And now I will say, it's it feels somewhat by design to kind of keep us our heads on a swivel, but in a very not in the most optimistic way. I would think that it's sort of throwing it's muddying the
Muddying the
waters.
waters. Yep.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. And that's what it
I learned
feels like.
something recently,
Mhm.
that the term fake and gay is actually an op. So I don't know the details of it. I was listening to Juan on the One on One podcast. Shout out to Juan
Shout out
Ayala.
Juan.
Shout out Juan.
One's great.
And he was talking about one thing or another, and his guest made him aware because Juan often says like, "Oh, nope, fake and gay," and he says it in a
Mhm.
sarcastic way, which is like everything that happens in conspiracy land is fake and gay now because that is the temperature. It's the
Yeah.
temperature of the climate. It's the temperature of the conversation. Every time something happens, we go fake, gay. And now I'm just saying it for fun. But this guy brought to his attention that that was actually a term that was created. He likened it to the way that the CIA coined the term conspiracy theorist after the
Exactly.
JFK
A
assassination to
pejorative.
discredit anybody. And I
Yeah.
went, that if that's true, that one was almost as effective as the term conspiracy theorist, because me and everybody else were saying, fake and gay every time something popped up. And I went, shit.
Mm.
So it's like a demoralization campaign. It's a way to muddy the waters and
That's the
throw a
black
bunch of
pill
false
to me
trails.
as well. I feel
Mhm.
like a lot of that now, I do believe there are people who are out there black pilling for the sake of, honestly, I'm not entirely certain if they're attempting to just demoralize, right?
Mm.
But I think many people are just in a place where they're kind of just now waking up to a lot of these ideas.
Yeah.
And there are kind of a few different reactions that typically take place when that occurs. And I'm kind of realizing that you have where, at least personally for myself, I think it's a part of the collectivist poison pill nature of in my mind, really, it's a, a strategic way of kind of really, in my mind, just designing this sort of psychological framework for the new age, and
Mm.
that ultimately becomes a trap. And I believe that's where you have this inevitable god hole where your soul is becomes in jeopardy. And this is where you have kind of people really just fleeing from the current structure, but they have no real conceptual understanding of where exactly to flee to. And so
Mhm.
therefore, again, in this very dangerous area, as far as where, again, your soul is hanging in the balance. And most people aren't entirely aware of that actually being the case, although I think that they're subconsciously realizing that there's a lot at stake in
Yeah.
this very current paradigm. But yeah, I'm very much under the impression at this moment that there are bad actors within the alternative media landscape who are presenting these ideas
Mm.
in a demoralizing way for that very reason. But
You're kind
it's
of
also
describing, Austin, something that we've been talking about on the show, which is like you said that a lot of people had just woken up, and
yeah,
given all these, like, what would you call them? Like, it's almost like agent provocateurs, right? Like people that
yeah,
infiltrate like a cognitive. We talk about this, Cass Sunstein, Obama administration, cognitive infiltration, infiltrating and steering the conspiracy communities.
right,
Um, but the timing is so unique as far as historically speaking, because we've have a mass of people that just woke up because of, and now there are more disinformation agents in the conversation than ever before. And the problem
mm,
with that
yeah,
is when you just wake up to the idea that your paradigm isn't true and then the official narrative isn't true, there is a knee-jerk reaction, an instinctive reaction, much like getting tossed into chaotic waters. You start scrambling for anything that looks like a flotation device or anything that looks like the truth. So what
yeah,
happens is, and we're seeing this with the JQ movement, this isn't necessarily where I'm going, but it's a good example. Um, you wake up to the fact that you've been lied to. A bunch of disinformation agents point you in a certain direction. You get siloed, you get funneled into an idea camp.
exactly.
And when you get there, there are pieces of truth in this new place. And so you grab onto it. And it's like now it's your new truth, it's your new paradigm. Whereas if you've been in this for a while, you have those paradigms constantly shattered. And that actually kind of brings me to why we're here today, because there's an official narrative that we receive about a certain thing. And then there's the other one that you have to go, I guess, digging for when you
Yeah,
become disenchanted with whatever the mainstream media is feeding you. And an example of that is Waco, is the Davidians, and what happened there in
absolutely.
Texas. We get our own official narrative, and here we are. How many years later? It's been more. It's been almost 3 decades. Yeah, well, no, it probably is 3 decades now, right? When did it
Yeah,
happen? What year? 90.
it was 6 months after Ruby Ridge in '92, so it's
So we're past the three
yeah,
decades mark, and
yeah,
we're still talking about it because
mhm,
the official narrative that we held on to for so long was bunk as shit.
yeah.
And unfortunately, when you realize that, when it all falls apart, it's an uphill battle to try to then decipher what the truth is. So, where do you want to pick up this conversation in regards to?
Mm.
I want to hear what Austin thinks about what actually happened at Waco.
Man, I am yeah, I'm actually beginning to spiral into an alternative theory that I never took a whole lot of just credibility as far as at face value, right? It's tangential at best at the starting point. And then you discover that there's another window into this potential theory that seems to reinforce and provide a far more credible outline to this idea of it potentially being some sort of clandestine covert black site that had been utilized post World War II as far as Mount Carmel, this original property, which but we'll get into that because I honestly think that the first thing that we should do is just at the very least um, we had alluded to some of the beliefs that the Branch Davidians had embraced, and I think that this specifically looking at into the the personal history of David Koresh as well, which I think just I was unaware of kind of the trauma in his childhood that I
Mm.
think very clearly potentially developed this weird social dynamic that he had within this right the unorthodox sexual relationships that he was having with these young women.
Did we talk
But
about
also,
what he went through on the last
yeah,
episode? We
no,
did. Can you remind me of that?
yeah, yeah, absolutely, and also keep this in mind because I think this is very interesting as far as just reminding ourselves because there was a military presence, right? Delta Force operatives were actually on the ground at Waco at the final siege, right? When the fire broke out, and I believe that you have apparently there were legitimately like CIA was involved. You had an intelligence sharing operation as well, and understanding that that was a part of the final siege and the actual you know what is it? Baptism by fire is what the Davidians actually were kind of conditioned to believe and expect in the first place in terms of their doomsday prophecy,
That's
which
actually something that you see a lot in
yeah,
any sort of doomsday prophecy cult is the idea that we will be persecuted. It is
yeah,
coming, and they prepare their followers, their flock, whatever, for that inevitability.
exactly. And what I always find interesting in terms of these extremely it's almost paradigm shifting, but it very much is has had let's say a very negative outcome in terms of the cultural impact right on the tail end of these scandals that occurred right in American history, specifically like Waco,
Hmm.
and also many of these false flags, including when I researched the Omar Mateen network, right, in the Pulse nightclub shooting. I think a lot of these mass shootings are now like a modernized form of a lot more of kind of these sleeper cell Manchurian candidate types potentially being greenlit and activated in order to cause chaos and then provide a precedent setting operation to their then passed legislation. It's always a layered operation.
Hmm.
Also ultimately to again, it's a strategy of tension. So you just witness this recycled tactic that falls perfectly in line with Gladio and the Operation Gladio itself. And I think that really is the best window into this overall international covert and clandestine intelligence network that transcends international borders and very much was set up, I believe, through the rat lines post World War II. Through these, the Vatican was providing plausible deniability for laundering money through the operation itself, and so a lot of this ties back to right the city states and how that honestly I think that we have very much more of a fundamental um you know covert structured system that is representative of the deep state and the shadow cabal that truly do pull the strings behind the scenes. And I think that curtain is very thick in terms of clouding that ability to interpret the true power paradigm in regard to the vast majority of people. And so I always look at these false flag events. And by the way, I should mention the fact that false flags don't mean people didn't die, obviously. I
Right.
believe, you know what I mean? Like, I
I
think
love
that.
that idea,
Mhm.
Austin, that false flags means that nothing
Yeah, that
happened. It's
everything
like,
is
no, no,
fake.
no, no, no. Like
Yeah.
people died, dog. Like you're mistaking what I'm saying for me saying they wouldn't
Well,
people just to do a like a a manipulation of sorts. Like, no, you're disposable as shit. They'll kill us
Yeah,
all to get what they want.
it's a good
100%.
it's a good way to dismiss it. Like when we went on Tinfoil Hat and we were talking about the Trump assassination,
Yeah.
and people were mad. They're like, these guys are saying that this guy didn't die. I was like, nah, they would. Of course they would kill him. Like, who cares about that
Yeah.
guy?
The
And it's
dude in
just
the
a
back
great,
with the jacket.
yeah, that they spelled his name wrong after too. I was like, but like, they didn't even have the courtesy to spell his name correct. That whole thing smelled like shit. But it's like, of
Right.
course they would. People, they don't value your life at all. And as a matter of fact, if it makes their psyop look more legitimate, par for the course.
Exactly.
Absolutely. But that also doesn't entirely discount or dismiss the reality of an actual false flag hoax playing out,
Yeah.
which I believe have existed as well. I honestly, it's very difficult for me to even imagine that was an active elementary school. I'm not trying to
Doesn't look
get you
like
guys in
it.
trouble, but it doesn't look
No,
like
we
it,
did a whole episode on it, and I'm pretty convinced that that school was shut down before that shit ever happened.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying, and I do
Mhm.
believe there's a direct connection to the crisis actors that were actually employed by a specific agency, which I know just from the Boston Marathon bombing, right? They 100% have these government affiliate agencies that provide these crisis actors that
Mhm.
are well trained in these various conditions of presenting a lifelike right, simulated realities of utilizing actual blood squib assemblies that legitimately like will look as if you have an open wound that's
Mhm.
pumping blood, right? And it's fascinating while they have handlers moving throughout. It's very interesting, actually. Dave McGowan, back before he died, he did an amazing breakdown of what potentially could have happened at OKC, or not OKC, at the Boston Marathon bombing. And yeah, it very much seems as if that they had like individuals running around providing blood, just throwing blood on the ground as well, which it's very interesting. But yeah, and meanwhile, they had the secondary blast was a distractionary tactic, right? Which drew all the attention from the actual people who weren't involved in the operation itself, which was very at the finish line, was very isolated and taped off, and like all the individuals were put into their strategic locations and in their placements. That's why you have like the wheelchair parade of Carlos Arredondo. It's the funniest thing you'll ever see, and it's just like this guy then Jeff Bauman or whatever, who's in the wheelchair and his entire legs blown off, who somehow survived this event, and it's one of like in a few weeks he's out there on the ice of the
Mm.
Boston Bruins, like as this, like, yeah, it's amazing stuff. But
You
at,
see that a lot. These people that appear in one disaster ending up in something else. Like I believe the kids from I don't know if it was the kids from, but didn't somebody end up in a Super Bowl commercial or something really crazy
oh
like that?
man,
That whole story is really weird. Like a woman drove a bus away from the school to try to save the children. She then dropped a
right.
bus full of children off at some dude's house who didn't have children
Yeah,
but had a room full of
that
dolls.
guy's story is so
Bro, the
ridiculous,
whole
dude.
thing doesn't make any sense. Like all of it,
No,
when you really analyze it, if you take it for, once again, this talks about that narrative creation. If you take the official narrative of, it's pretty straightforward and it's sad. But if you
right.
start looking into it, just a little bit of scrutinizing, you find so many idiosyncrasies that are like idiosyncrasies is downplaying it. So many things that stand out as this makes no sense whatsoever,
Right.
and there's no shortage of them. It just
No.
keeps piling up and keeps piling up. But yeah, I mean, if we talk about it too much, we'll get our YouTube taken down. So
No,
fucking
I know, right?
go figure.
Yeah, and that is honestly, that should really just in itself kind of point out the reality, that if we are in any way objectively pursue an answer to any of these questions that are, in my mind, perfectly legitimate to be asking, and and especially be presenting in this way, when you're considering the fact that you have if if you don't understand asymmetric warfare and fifth generational warfare and kind of how this is all utilized to effectively put us on this dystopian path, right, that we can't quite interpret and understand for ourselves in any realistic way, to where we have some to where we manufacture a defense mechanism in order to provide ourselves with a structured response that makes any real sense and could potentially deal or root, even address the root causes of the issues that we're being presented with, right? And I think that when it boils down to it, and you're talking about running mass casualty events, right? And you're considering what is possible in terms of video footage and glaring evidence proving inconsistencies in regard to, just like we were talking about the Boston Marathon bombing. We're talking military grade moulage, as I had mentioned, equipped with artificial blood squibs, pump assemblies being applied under residual smoke coverage from the first blast. And so all of that presents like these oddities that people are unable to address, and especially with a lot of the apparent victims, which to me, I'm sorry, but when it boils down to this individual CIA agent named Robert Steele, thought this was always amazing because he had a statement about the Boston Marathon bombing, who claimed, "For me, the truth teller was when the rabbis and the priests rushed to comfort the wounded, and they were not allowed to get near any of the wounded." And he says that in intelligence, we call an indicator. And then you add to the fact that there were no wounded people taken to any hospitals. And by the way, you have,
There's no
and
wounded people taken to any
he says,
hospitals?
and finally, you add to that the big to do about the amputee. He turned out to be a hired actor for a company that specializes in putting amputees into battlefield simulations.
Oh
False
my
flag.
Fuck,
Boston
dude.
was a
So
practice attempt to lock down an entire city. It
huh.
was Operation, um, what was the name of the operation? Urban Shield. That's the name of the operation, which they were essentially, they had already ran an entire simulation, and also it's hilarious because one of the alleged nurses who was actually seeing these bombing victims come to the hospital, well, claimed on CNN that on a segment that they actually witnessed this, was Dr. Leanna Wynn,
Yeah.
right? The same woman who's been trotted out many, many times over the years as a modern Mockingbird asset to provide a false narrative and misconceptions to the public. And she tells this overly dramatized story about how she's each and every victim she hadn't heard that are coming into the hospital, she hadn't heard from her husband. And so she then claims that until she actually got a call from her husband, yeah, that's her. She she claimed that every single last victim that was coming in on the stretchers, she just imagined being her husband, right? And she's like
Oh my
speaking
god,
in this
yeah.
emotion. Yeah, it's very over
That's what
emotional.
gets me is all these events, not even just these events, it's like everything. And we can look to as a great
She was
example of
a
this.
she was the president of Planned Parenthood as well?
Oh my god.
5
There
years
you
ago?
go. Like,
There's no
what
fucking
the
way, man.
That's
That's
hilarious.
incredible, dude. This
Look at
this
this.
lady's got
Yeah, she
some
was just like
real
so she was removed as president of Planned Parenthood. This is a
Wow.
5-year-old
yeah,
article.
because she had to go into the false flag business and you can't do
And then she
two.
became like some sort of official. But before that,
Fucking
she was
girl
a
boss. She's a
Yeah.
girl boss, Top. All right, that's what she is. I don't know. I don't appreciate all your
God.
suspicion, but that appeal to emotion has
Mhm.
it has screwed me up to such a degree that I will not be emotionally manipulated now. And
Right.
and it's like you could actually roll out something in front of me that is harrowing, and just knowing how the media works, knowing that they manipulate us through emotion, they manipulate us with
Right.
children a lot. It literally begets comedy from me. Now I want
Mhm.
nothing more than to ridicule what you're doing because I can't allow myself to even entertain the idea that this is real, because
Right.
if it's not, you've got me in an emotional trap. And that's
I think
Oh,
huge.
this is why like the effectiveness of Kanye's new song right now, like people are feeling that way about all of this stuff.
Mhm.
And
right.
now it's like comedy added with this like spicy boy mentality that everybody's trying to be a little bit edgy, and then added to a dope track. It's just like a deadly formula for another type of psyop that would lead you into,
complete
so many
fascism,
thoughts.
like,
Yeah,
you
you're
don't have
thinking
that emotional empathy anymore. You're now just
Yeah.
pursuing, I don't know,
like
offing an entire people or some
on one
shit.
hand, I'm very happy about it taking away a sacred cow that's been used against us. But on the other
Right.
hand, I think it's building a new one about like a lot of people are going to buy into this Hitler broism where it's like,
Oh
well,
man.
it's not,
Mhm.
that's not it either, dude. But
Exactly.
But it's
Yeah.
fun
yeah,
to watch in the meantime. Look,
yeah,
I've gotten to a place where I no longer care about like waking people up. I'm here having a discussion with you, Austin, because I love this information and I have a passion for the truth. I don't care about waking other people
no,
up.
I don't care.
If you fall for these things, like I know that Hitler was steeped in the occult, and I know that there's even a chance that he was placed there. He was a Rothschild. Who the knows? I don't really care.
Mind
I know the
control.
official narrative was
Possible.
bullshit. Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I know the official narrative was bullshit, but you're not going to catch me with that Hitler bro shit. And I don't even
Mm.
care if you fall for it. I'll
Yeah.
admit it's fun in the meantime. It's a lot of fun in the
Yeah.
meantime. I'm
It's
having
so
a
much
blast
fun.
right now.
Yeah, yeah. That's how we have to honestly embrace it, because in the end, I do think that we need to contend with it in some terms, just internally, to where we put it in its proper place psychologically for ourselves.
Yeah.
But
I don't
yeah,
think we're
I'm
doing
trying.
that anymore. I don't think
No,
Austin, do you
man.
think that putting all this shit in the compartment of comedy is I mean, I know I understand the response and how we got here, but is it
Yeah, yeah.
good? It's probably not
No,
Yeah,
good,
it's
it's
right?
not good.
Probably
yeah,
not good.
it's probably not the best way, but but it's a coping mechanism at the end of the day. It's
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
really
because you
what
is.
it's
keep trying to
become.
trick us, dude. You
That's
keep
what
trying
I'm
to get
saying.
us into wars. You keep trying to get us to give up our rights. You keep trying to get us to, it's like it's never ending emotional wrench where we come out
Mhm.
with the shit end of the stick every time. I can't fall for
100%.
it anymore. I have to laugh in your face now.
Yep, yep. And that's my, who knows what the reality is in terms of Kanye. Like, I have my own personal opinion as far as what is going on with Harley Pasternak or whatever, right? I'll send you off to Zombieland. The
Yeah.
date,
Mhm.
right?
Hell of a
Play
threat.
dates with the kids will never be the same. Like that alone. I mean, come on, what is that? And he has a direct military intelligence background for psychological operations, and like
Many such
all to do
cases.
with like, yeah,
Yeah,
Fucking
even
yeah,
Wanda
Canada.
Sykes.
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. And and then beyond that, I just see he's so very often it seems like he kind of falls into the framework of a culture terrorist almost. Like, you know what I mean? Like
I love
he's
that idea. A culture terrorist, a
that's
cultural terrorist. That's a
what it feels
t-shirt.
like.
dog. That's what it
Right.
A
is.
cultural terrorist is a t-shirt right there. That's a banger.
But
Let me
it,
write that down. Yeah, that's
hell
fucking
yeah.
great, dude.
Write that shit down,
But
man.
that's what he truly seems like to me, because at the very least, I think he's being utilized in that way. Now, it's hard for me to imagine that he's not aware of it due to the timing of everything and how perfectly in place he always seems
Agreed.
to be
Hmm.
on the forefront of providing these misconceptions to each side of the political aisle, kind of
Well, did
wherever
I
you
tell
land.
you? So January 20th, I forget what happened January 20th, but it was like
The
the Jewish
election.
sentiment. Maybe it was, I don't know. The sentiment was so overwhelming that I recognized it was reaching a point where it needed a mile marker.
Right.
And so I tweeted on January 20th, I said it's time for Kanye West to reemerge. And that motherfucker, like a couple of weeks later, does the
There
whole
he
Super
is.
Bowl thing. He comes back and now he's here to stay. So I agree with you, Austin. I don't think that he doesn't see the the perfect alignment of his timing and what's
Mhm.
going on culturally speaking and geopolitically speaking. And after that question, it's like, well, what the fuck is he doing then? And is he
Right.
operating on his own free will? Or is this
True.
something else where we as a species are moving in a direction? I don't know.
Absolutely. And that's where I contend. I just consistently find myself in this place where I'm restructuring my own paradigm of what I actually fundamentally view as being realistic and possible. And
Mhm.
that is what it's like, man, I find myself in like this science fiction version of reality, and more often than not with this level of spirituality involved, that I just had no understanding and acknowledgement of this additional factor in life that
Mm.
seems to be the most important in it, at the very least, being able to acknowledge this as the reality we reside in. And I think that that's where the manipulation is consistently being done, And we're all kind of just conditioned to function at this subconscious level where we're not engaging with that reality in realistic terms. And so that in itself is what provides this perfect landscape and
Oh,
false
there's that
path
tweet. January
of
20th. That was, man, that was
wow.
a good call. I got lucky on that one. But
Absolutely.
we talked about this in the last episode too. You and Jose, you delve into the parapolitical espionage and intelligence agencies, and you're looking for the documents and you're getting the names and you're getting the dates. But I know damn well, because I've been in that circle before,
Right.
of course, he's a huge crossover. If you're into conspiracy, you're gonna go in that place. But every
Mhm.
time I did, I just kept butting against some sort of spiritual supernatural shit. It's like every
Absolutely.
time I ran out of, this document or that document in this rabbit hole to go, I'd end up at a place where the brick wall in front of me was made of spirits.
Yeah.
and like, I'm like, what do you, I, I feel like Jose, um, he looks at it and he says, "Yeah, that thing keeps popping up," and then he kind of like goes around it and
Yeah.
he says, Maybe a conversation for another time." Although he'll joke in it and he'll talk about it. I feel
Yeah.
like you are entering this place in your research where you're going, "This has to be considered. There's
Oh,
something here that keeps showing up, and it has to be considered."
yeah, I'm not at all willing to dismiss it in any real way, mainly due to the fact that it's not that I'm just consistently seeing it so very often playing such a prominent role within the context of these, scandals or investigations or abuse networks or just clandestine intelligence operations of kind of distorting and controlling the human mind
Mhm.
in so many ways. And it's so very much just drenched in the occult. And it's like how do you how do you kind of like put your head back into the sand when each and every time that is a fundamental aspect of every single one of these cases, that to control the psyche, through MK Ultra and all of these various offshoots. Monarch is the most fascinating to me, honestly, at this moment because of the trauma-based mind control involved, and the we were just talking about the butterfly and the
Yeah.
symbology that it represents so very often in the terms of this, you know, Project Monarch, but also, trauma-based mind control through sexual trauma as a young child and effectively creating these altars. But here's what blew me away because I didn't know about Operation Spellbinder,
I've
right?
never
Like
heard of that. Can you explain that?
it's amazing, man, because this was strategically set up as obviously top secret, set up to create sleeper assassins, Manchurian candidates who could be activated upon receiving a key word or phrase while in a post hypnotic trance. Now, that's obviously in reference to Sirhan. Sirhan's one of the best examples of that. Clearly, due to the technique of psychic driving that was potentially utilized to effectively put him into this psychological state, and he had, if you remember, he had mentioned that he went into range mode and saw targets in front of his eyes, and he was firing uncontrollably in the pantry after the woman in the polka dot dress essentially gave him his trigger, right? Which the trigger comes in all different ways. It comes in the form of a scent, a touch, so a
Wow.
physical touch, a smell. So this woman's had a specific smell, and the visual aspect of her dress with the black polka dots. It effectively put him into range mode when all of these things were triggered all at once in the right moment, and who knows what was in the coffee because all he could say was coffee, coffee, coffee. That was his last moment of remembering sitting down with the woman in the polka dot dress and drinking coffee. And so he couldn't remember anything after that. And his defense attorney, Lawrence Teeter, he still claims, right, that Sirhan was operating under sophisticated mind control techniques when he shot at RFK, which many people believe, and I do as well, that he was clearly firing blanks in the pantry to as a distractionary tactic to draw away attention from the true assassin, who was Thane Eugene Cesar, the security guard moonlighting as a security guard at the Ambassador Hotel, who was directly behind and holding RFK, who RFK actually fell back on him whenever he died. And so, and it's all known at this point that the shots came right behind the back of the head, point blank range. And yeah, and Sirhan wouldn't stop firing after he was tackled to the ground. He's just firing a fake imaginary pistol, which,
Crazy.
what is that? I mean,
Dude,
that's
what
your
they can
programming.
do, what they can do to our mind, I think is whatever they discovered, it's at the foundation of so much of what they pursue. And I can't help but think about how Project Monarch applies to our celebrities, right? Because you see that butterfly symbolism constantly, especially associated with female pop singers. You know, your
Mhm.
Britney Spears, your Katy Perry's. And I got to thinking about those people. They have these like meltdowns. But they're
Yeah.
very unique meltdowns where like, you know, Katy Perry will start like spazzing out and one eye will start twitching and she'll become like unresponsive
Dude,
for
I
a
know.
while. And then everybody goes, she's just getting it. I don't know what the
Mm,
fuck's wrong with that bitch. And then we just move on, right? But what I realized is if you run them through this program and you do create this, you succeed in creating a dissociative identity disorder. You
right.
split someone's personality, and that enables you to kind of program one of the personalities. Well,
Mhm.
disassociation typically happens when you're experiencing something like trauma that's so traumatic that you want to recede from it entirely, and you physically can't get away. So mentally, you find a way. The brain creates a gap, and you can slip through it and go elsewhere.
Right.
And in those moments of interviews, red carpet events, stage performances, where we see these people melt down, you imagine that it is incredibly anxiety inducing, that everything, the pressure is so much, it's the perfect place to disassociate, which
Yeah.
is then why you see those moments where they'll fall into this other program and they'll start spazzing out because the severity of the situation has caused them to disassociate, and they have programming for when that disassociation happens.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I guess it kind of gets all fucked up and their wires get crossed, but I think it's the high pressure situation that exposes that in these artists. And I think that it's like a tell that they have been
Absolutely.
not just not indoctrinated, that's not the word, but they've been experimented on, they've been
Yeah.
manipulated, they've been traumatized, split, and then re-released on the public as a dog on a leash.
Yep.
Absolutely. And that's why I think that there's so many references to the self-destruction. Well, basically they implement a self-destructive technique into the altars, various altars that they supplant these so apparently you can reinforce the altars with positivity or negativity, and it has a various obviously different outcomes based on what you can program them to essentially inevitably pursue. And so basically, and this has all been, I think, much more sophisticated in modern day, and we're unaware of how well they're able to actually accomplish their goals at this very moment, because I've read about so much of these victims basically having a shelf life
Mm.
before they woke up to their prior programming and rejected it, at least began to reject it, which is another reason why that individual who woke up in the bathroom right at that Colorado amusement park, who claimed I'm not a killer, and like had broken in and then killed himself. It was almost as if he was rejecting his programming in some sort of way, and was, some sort of sleeper Manchurian that had been triggered. And imagine what that would feel like if you were triggered to commit a mass shooting or something, and you're
Right.
emotionally and ethically opposed to doing such a thing, and
It would,
and
yeah.
you find yourself waking up in these positions that you can't. That was like Tamerlan Tsarnaev in the Boston Marathon bombing, telling his mom, like, I can't account for all this loss in time. I'm waking up in these locations. This is leading up to the bombing. Like, I think that they're manipulating my psychology. That's what he said, my mind. And that alone is like
That's huge.
uh, huge red flag.
Let me
You
ask
know
you
what
this,
I mean?
Austin. In your
Yeah.
research, with all these like Manchurian candidates and everything, have you come
Mhm.
across a proclivity? This is a little bit of a throwaway joke by the chat,
Mm.
but they did spark an interest. Federal agent says Monarch victims
Yep.
often have their hair dyed blonde. Anything you want to tell us,
Uh,
Raven?
hey.
Now, I have done that, and that's because I'm a closeted homosexual man, and I have to let it out in some way, shape, or form.
Oh,
Um,
shit.
but I am now wondering if there is any prevalence of these shooters, these
Mhm.
Manchurian candidates, school shooters, etc., having dyed hair. Because to me, it would serve a purpose if you have a patient or whatever, a subject that you want to create a dissociative identity disorder within, it certainly helps a lot for that individual to look in the mirror and see a different person.
Right.
Mhm.
Oh man, James Holmes looked like he transitioned into a different person. It was like the soul left his body and he was just a demon. Like that's what it looked like when you look at him. So, and then you talk about the platinum blonde though. Like that specifically platinum blonde was involved in regard to this strange uh um like very interesting cult that has mind control connections to the intelligence community in Australia, that
Yeah, there we go.
raised
Who's that?
yeah,
That's the Batman shooter, isn't it?
yeah, The Dark Knight,
The Dark
yeah,
Knight
Aurora,
shooter. Yeah.
Colorado,
Mm,
Cinema 16 or something. Can't remember, but either way, yeah, fascinating story that one is,
mhm.
but yeah, also Julian Assange. I found that very interesting when I did an episode on Julian Assange. He grew up in a very strange cult where all of them were forced to dye their hair platinum blonde. And the woman who ran the cult seems to have direct ties to this very strange intelligence and mind control operation that was being conducted through Australian intelligence. It was basically this intelligence sharing operation to run MK Ultra, for basically on behalf of the CIA in many ways, but it was
Mhm.
also overlapping in what they could accomplish and share. Um, Within the context of the operation. So but I found it very interesting that apparently he and his mother tried to separate themselves from this cult and were then essentially kind of harassed and this man that she had a sexual relationship with like refused to let them live their own lives and was kind of targeted harassment as far as their family was concerned, followed them
So
all
it's
over the
safe to
place.
say that he experienced childhood trauma.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think there's more to that story too, because I am concerned that maybe there are more manufactured personalities than we're aware of in regard to a lot of these backstories that seem like it's almost coming out of a comic book. Like
Mhm.
you look at it, it seems too, you know, just
Too
too
perfect as far as the story goes, because
yeah, it's too
sometimes I
much
think
to
about that.
believe.
I think that we've been inundated with works of fiction through Hollywood to such a degree that we now are willing to accept those things when they manifest in real life. But if you
Mhm.
removed Hollywood, I think a lot of situations that happen in real life, people would take a step back and they say, "There's no way. The odds of that happening are astronomical. Something else is happening here." But we're programmed with fantastic stories constantly. So when
Mhm.
one appears in real life, instead of going like, "That seems a little uncanny, too good to be
Right.
true," you might say, instead you go, you file that away in that
I've
fucking
seen
movie
this
that you saw,
before.
and you go, "Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just like this. It's just
100%.
like that thing I've seen."
Yeah, the pattern recognition just off the charts at this point, and I've described it recently just as a superpower because it does become that. It feels like that in certain ways, in terms of I'm now recognizing the fact that within the context of like paperclip, and
Mhm.
very much kind of sitting down and learning what the mind control techniques of the Reich really had to offer, then
Mm.
embracing those very techniques and then seeing the consequential aftermath occur throughout the domestic US and really all throughout the world with the strategy of tension that played out after the fact, these environments of destabilization that were very convenient for, let's say, just um, an internal regime change operation of some kind. You could utilize the NGO complex, private entities in the private sector to kind of accomplish those goals. Strategic black sites set up all throughout, like, and that was another thing that Howard Hughes did on behalf of the Nixon administration before Nixon was even president, when he was VP. He like tapped Howard Hughes in to set up all these domestic black sites to train up these Cuban exiles to commit domestic terrorism operations, essentially. And it was far more than that, because I think Henry Lee Lucas and the Hand of Death cult were very much involved in being trained up on some of these domestic black sites with intelligence capability that. They were being tipped off whenever military flights would go over the property, so they could then kind of hide all the evidence of this
Right.
black site. And so that alone provides the reality that there was an intelligence connection, let alone all of the individuals who were involved. But they were training these people to on instructing them on how to professionally abduct children, commit ritual murder, right? And
Mhm.
with the Hand of Death cult, cannibalism was involved there as well, and they were like cutting out the hearts of like these students that at Metamoros was a huge scandal in Mexico, but you then again, this all applies to these very it's the pattern recognition again, because I'm witnessing the fact that there's a potential reality where the Nazis had obviously they were pursuing transhumanism and eugenics policies that they very much modeled after the US, which people aren't aware of enough. Even at the Nuremberg trials, they defended themselves by saying, "We just copied the techniques of the Americans. Like, what are you talking about?
That's
This is
hilarious.
it's hilarious."
I
And
didn't
by
know
the
that.
way, it was one of the SS members, and I need to pull this one day because I continue to forget his name. But he had his mic cut during the Nuremberg trials when he said we were all under mind control, right? Yeah, and so
Whoa!
that made me like, dude, I'll never forget that. And as far as what I believe happened in post World War One, as far as Hitler hanging out with these usual suspects
Mhm.
and he apparently, dude, it seems like Hitler was 100% put through this. I read a few different books on how he potentially was supplanted with these altars as well, and was mind controlled in specific ways. And I think that Hitler and the cult, whenever I covered it, it really blew me away, because I found out that once they actually invaded that same area that Hitler was hanging out in post World War One, where he was allegedly a male prostitute, which is hilarious. I didn't understand that as well, but
Damn,
he
Hitler was selling that booty? That's
oh yeah,
crazy. I didn't think.
dude,
But Hitler's
it
based. What are you talking about?
man,
Hitler's
I
super
think
based. He's super
uh-huh.
cool. He was the good guy. What he wasn't selling booty.
Dude,
That's not a
I'm
good
telling you
guy.
right now, he heard a voice, right, that he gave a name, which
Oh
I kind of
shit.
thought, yeah, yeah.
Wait,
It's
wait, wait, wait.
it's
Hitler heard a voice?
oh yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
wait. Hold on, wait, wait. Stop right there because you're going into a place that I'm incredibly excited to go to, and I refuse to go
Okay.
there with any poor people. So, guys, if you're watching this right now and you're enjoying this, you have two options. You can either go to patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad, where you can continue to enjoy this, enjoy an ad-free experience, engage with the live chat, gain early access to the episode, or you can go over to Austin's channel. What's your channel, Austin?
The Underclass Podcast, guys.
You can go over to the Underclass Podcast, subscribe, because if you don't, that's totally gay. And you can continue watching this episode because it will keep streaming over on Austin's channel. But otherwise, it's too many poor people. Too many poor people. They have to go. They have to go now. And we got to
It's
talk about Hitler. We got to talk about him selling booty. We got
we
to
still
talk
we
about
still
him
haven't
hearing voices.
we still haven't hit the
I'm a
Fuck the
monster.
Davidians. Are you
I'm a
kidding me? This guy
monster.
just told me
He's a
that Hitler
monster.
is selling ass and he's hearing voices that he gave a name to. You think I give a shit about
Bye,
David Koresh?
boys.
Listen,
Goodbye.
on this show, we talk a lot about the idea that these MK Ultra mind control techniques, specifically in the way of trauma based mind control. You induce a state of disassociation, and through that, apparently the world is your oyster. A lot of different things open up: latent psychic abilities, the ability to program an individual, the ability to have those individuals communicate with something in a spiritual realm. These are, I guess, the gravy that's worth the squeeze, or the juice that's worth the squeeze. But Austin, are we, you know what? Put a
Absolutely.
pin in that. I want to know if we're retarded for thinking that, but I got to hear about but Hitler and a voice that he named. What did he name it?
Mhm.
What did it say? Where did it come from? Where did it go?
Dude, it is
Hi, Joe.
it's all surrounding his time at the Payswalk, right? This is very interesting. Hitler at Payswalk is what it's called, and essentially
Hitler
there's
pays walk?
Hitler's time at Payswalk, right?
Okay.
Yeah, it's a very interesting institution that seems to have direct connections to the Tavistock Institute. And so Hitler claimed to have been guided by a voice, which he referred to as providence. That's what he called
Providence.
it. So, by his own account, Quote, unless I have the incorruptible condition, I do nothing. Not even if the whole party tried to drive me to action, I will not act. I will wait, no matter what happens. But if the voice speaks, then I know the time has come to act. So,
How the is this just reaching my radar? Look, we have been
my,
skeptical of all the Hitler is based shit because I think that he was in communication with entities. I think that he was communing with spiritual entities. I
yep.
specifically think that those entities were the fallen. And the reason I say that is because he chose Zeus to be sort of the centerpiece for everything that he did. When he commissioned the architect to design the Zeppelin Tribune Fairgrounds, where he would be giving his speeches from, that's where you
Mhm.
see him at the podium, and there's hundreds of thousands of people. That the inspiration for that was taken from a temple that is now in the Berlin Museum. That temple is the there you go, yeah, that's fucking what they were asking, methamphetamine. That temple is the it's the altar to Zeus. It was found in Pergamum. And
Mhm.
Pergamum is now modern day Turkey, but in the Bible it says that Pergamum is where the throne of Satan is. And I think Satan being the accuser is a title, but the entities that are in alignment with that spirit are typically fallen angels or their offspring. I think that's exactly what Zeus was, and I think that's why it's got the altar of Pergamum. The temple of Zeus is where he's giving his speeches from. He's
Right.
got the thunderbolts on his chest. He's got the eagle, which is the number one. Go on Google and say what animal is associated with Zeus. You will find it's the eagle that's associated with Zeus. All the iconography surrounding Hitler was of a very particular fallen angel. And I know because of our conversations with Dr. Jerry Marzinski, he
Mhm.
was a clinical psychologist who dealt with schizophrenic people. And he said that in his experience, drug use can mirror and cause the same effects as schizophrenia. And the number one that's the most effective at causing the same exact symptoms of schizophrenia is meth. So this dude is
Mhm.
taking meth, right? And he's communicating with spirits, and he's got the iconography of fallen angels all around him. But Hitler was based. So
Right.
yeah, please, I
A
would love
lot
to know
of
about
the
this.
mind control drugs that they would utilize had methamphetamine based principles as well within the formula, and so that I think matters as well. And yeah, so he's Greg Howlett, right? He's the author of Hitler Was a British Agent, and this is very interesting because I think there's something to this, especially in the memoirs of Bridget Hitler, which is it seems to reinforce a lot of this because essentially when Hitler was in England in 1912 to 1913, a fact supported by his sister-in-law's book, The Memoirs of Bridget Hitler. So he proposes that Hitler spent February to November 1912 undergoing mind control training at the British military Psyops war school at Tavistock in Devon and in Ireland. So Hitler's sister-in-law describes him as completely wasted upon his arrival at her Liverpool home, luggageless. She says, quote, I had an idea he was ill. His color was so bad and his eyes looked so peculiar, she wrote.
Meth.
Quote, he was always reading, not books, little pamphlets printed in German. I don't know what was in them, nor exactly where they came from. Now, Greg Hallett proposes that this reading material was actual mind control manuals from Tavistock. and
What the
and
fuck?
so what gave rise to the Tavistock program, obviously, was the British Army Psychological Warfare Bureau's use of propaganda during World War I, which was intended to convince the British that war was necessary and that Germany was an enemy to be detested. And so it very much became, obviously, you have to remember, all of these individuals who are caught up in the psychological warfare program set up at Tavistock. You had, a lot of them profiting from and also coming from the British Army Bureau that were really running this clandestine operation. But all of this coming off the orders of the British monarchy at the time, who placed even the British newspaper magnate Alfred Harmsworth, Viscount Northcliffe, owner of the Daily Mail, the Daily Mirror, and the Times, and an admirer of Cecil Rhodes, right? Who said, I would annex the planets if I could, right? That
Let
a
me ask you
piece of
something,
shit.
Austin. You
Mhm.
have so Bridget Hitler. That's Hitler's sister or half sister or
Sister-in-law.
sister-in-law.
Yeah,
Sister-in-law.
sister-in-law.
How is it? I imagine it is dismissed. How then conventionally is it dismissed when people talk about the fact that she's saying he was a victim of mind control and even
People don't
specifying where this
discuss
shit
this.
happened?
And, like, legitimately, my Hitler episode got pulled, man. Like, it's one of, like, 3 episodes that was pulled instantly, and it was, I think,
Damn.
because of the Pacewalk connection, and I honestly one of the at least 2 out of the 3 books that specifically referenced this, at least 2 of them were never even translated for the longest time from German, and you have very, very little that you can actually access, and it very extremely expensive too, as far as, like, actually gaining any sort of
It's
copies
one of
of
those
the
fucking books that's like $3,000 because it's
exactly. And so, I feel as if, once again, right, they paywall like, this is the underclass, right? This is the reason that I named my podcast this, because I truly believe that we're in this place where you seemingly there's a paywall for even access to, let's say, when I'm looking at some of these, attempting to kind of trace some of these original source materials, like, man, so many of them are just instantly paywalled if they're new and actually providing a very important line of investigation to the public. They're instantly paywalled, and usually they kind of like typically approach this with like the 1984 memory hole of kind of finding ways to effectively just eliminate it from being presented to the public in any real way in the first place. And I think that's where a lot of this information has come to reside, right? Is that it'll be inevitably, ultimately just left to the Internet Archive. And then
right.
the Internet Archive gets hacked, and all of a sudden, all of that information is no longer available. And you
It's our
better have
fucking
archived it yourself, you
it's
You
our
know
know?
what's
Library of
funny?
Alexandria.
This is
Yeah.
this episode is technically paywalled, and you have a couple of our guys in your chat talking shit about. That's fine. Just make sure that your cheap ass
I'm
subscribe.
bad, dog. Hey, be
This
nice, guys.
motherfucker's in
Press,
his chat. He's always in our chat too. What the
yeah, no,
Yeah.
he hopped over. He's too poor. At least press the subscribe button to
dude? That's it.
Austin. If
Yeah.
you're over there,
Love it.
subscribe.
Let me
Like,
highlight this for you real quick though. This is
yeah.
fascinating. So in Stoic philosophy, providence refers to the divine rational order of the cosmos, equated with
Wow.
Zeus.
Oh
Get
my
the fuck
god.
out of here.
That is
Equated with Zeus, dude.
wow.
What the? I'm telling you, people, everybody, and I honestly, that was the thing. No matter what falls away, I'm always like, why the is the Temple of Zeus where they got the inspiration for the Zeppelin Tribune Fairgrounds?
Right.
Why is that the case? And everybody says, you're gay. Hitler's based and you're gay. And I'm like, fine,
Yeah.
dude.
It's
But why?
funny.
Can you answer that question?
It's funny.
Right.
It's funny how like it's like Hitler versus the Jews, but I don't think the Jews. So like we're talking about these ancient deities or fallen angels. The Jews aren't really worshiping God anymore. They've fallen off many times. I don't know what Judaism is worshiping, but it's
Right.
another entity. There is another fallen deity that they are worshiping, and it seems like the Nazis were exemplifying another fallen entity, and they went to war. One won, one lost, and it's like neither of these things are good. Can we like take a look at that and just make
Well, it's
heads and
interesting
tails of that?
because I'm thinking a lot about like, the concept of like the Roman Empire. And,
Mhm.
obviously like Jupiter is interchangeable with Zeus. It's the same character. But then you look over at Germany and Zeus propagates all the way into Germany, if that's really what we're looking at here. So and let's even Zeus, throw that away. It's a fallen angel. So we have this one fallen angel who tends to be the most influential one of the gang over and over again. All these different pantheons kind of have like the real central guy. It seems like it's Zeus over and over again. And
Right.
or whatever, this fallen angel. And then you look at, what actually happens to the regime, and it appears that they don't go away. We absorb a shit ton of them in Operation Paperclip. The Russians absorb a shit ton of them. A bunch of them flee to Argentina. And that even begets a whole new conspiracy about Argentina, Antarctica, and Hitler going to Antarctica and having UFOs and all this shit. It's so much fun, but it's like it never died because those
Right.
people that we took in Operation Paperclip built all the institutions that make this country go round. And if you look around at all the architecture in Washington, D.C., in all those political power places, it's all Greek architecture, and it's filled with Greek symbolism everywhere. Owls of Minerva and all this shit. Like, it never went away. It
No.
just changes faces, but it's the same entities pulling the same strings.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You know, the legitimate, as far as like I kind of is just in terms of trying to study what allegedly, you know, inspired the Tool Society's belief system in ways as well, because I was trying to kind of like trace the occultism that was tied to the occult, as far as just the SS and the inner circle at the time, at least allegedly, what we're intended to believe. And it seems like so much of this went back to these Volkish groups that seem to have been very much in that interesting occult framework of old Germanic antiquity that that really kind of helped influence the rising nationalist tide. Along with, obviously, you clearly had this interesting aspect of the Treaty of Versailles post World War One, giving the German people all they needed as far as incentives to be one what would I mean, imagine what would happen if your entire country was isolated on the world stage in such a way, right, post World War One, and kind of really enslaved by the Allied Entente in so many ways, right? That restructured all of modern society, global society, after these world wars took place, but especially after World War One, Germany was effectively punished, right? And so their entire incentives lie with restructuring, obviously, the treaty that clearly was just this sort of like, it was forced upon them in the first place. No one ever accepted this, and so those terms were never accepted, and so you have this naturally occurring just bitter resentment that's clearly, being tapped into at a level where I think people are unaware of how much was actually being controlled by, like, Rudolf von Bottendorf, right? Who apparently was the original um, founder of the Tool, right? The Tool Society, and basically later styled them before Hitler came, and essentially, like, they chose Hitler specifically as this manifestation of this Volkish god, right? That he would then become. And so I think that potentially he was kind of like set perfectly on this path due to his mind controlled aspect of just kind of like being conditioned at his time in Payswalk, through these Tavistock hypnosis, post hypnotic suggestion. He's reading these mind control manuals that he's forced to read, but he's also being entirely influenced by this strange, Volkish occult activity that ties in with the Tool, esoteric belief system. But when you're talking about actually dealing with Hitler in this voice still, because I think it's very important to make some of these uh, at least kind of tie some of this together, and also remember the fact that it's interesting to me because so much of this ties into Sabbatai and Francus, and being involved as well, which I was unaware of until I did this episode on Hitler specifically.
Can I just,
But
I just want to say for the audience sake really quickly that if that's true, that the idea that Hitler wouldn't move unless this voice, like, even if the party wanted him to move, he's like, hold, not doing it yet. Not yet, not yet. But if that voice told him to jump, he would jump. Right. So
Right.
Hitler is receiving divine instruction from a disembodied voice, and he does not choose to ever surround himself with Christian or Catholic iconography. So he believes in this thing is guiding him. Do you mean to tell me that Hitler never once considered for a moment that this voice is God? And whatever God he decided it was not the God of the Bible. It was not the God of Christianity or the God of Catholicism, or else he would have, because you could say Hitler wasn't into those things. You could say Himmler was the guy that was into the occult. Hitler was never into that shit. So a guy with a disembodied voice in his head telling him when to act is not into the spiritual.
Right.
And then he decides to surround himself with all this iconography that is not Christian or Catholic, but that's not him. That's
It's
the
also
fucking mental gymnastics that people go through to try to absolve this dude.
But it's also like the explanation of his moves towards the end of Germany. It's like I can't understand why he did that. Why did he invade here? Why did he do this? It was illogical. I mean, like, half of his troops were starved out in the tundra. It makes no sense. It was like, well, he's told to, and he just did it. That's the only reason that you do something. So like if something led you to such great success for over a decade, when it tells you to do something foolish, I suppose he trusted it, and they did it, and it was
Yeah.
like stupid. Like
Right.
whatever it got, whatever it wanted from it, it got, and it was done with them.
Well, it might not have been stupid if Hitler really did, like let's go to real crazyville and say Hitler did escape to Antarctica and he went on to do something, beyond the ice wall, which is what, a lot of people, if you go to the real crazy places, that's what they think. And I go, that's sexy. And I like that idea. I've not
Right.
really given it its due diligence at all. But that it's not foolish if it was part of something that the world can't perceive.
Right.
We only look at it now as like, oh yeah, he's an idiot.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, when you're dealing with like in my opinion, the Sabbatean Kabbalah and Ariosophy that very much influenced the tool society's line of thinking, as far as I'm concerned. I think that kind of brings in a lot of what was happening as far as the Aleister Crowley influence. I didn't realize that there was a deep occult influence and the Rosicrucians were tied in. Blavatsky's Theosophical Society was very much appreciated by the Hitler and the SS, apparently. And yeah, you have not only do you have the Freemasonic Lodge, right, being involved as far as like kind of pushing forward this irregular Masonic and Rosicrucian Lodge in Germany in 1902, which directly brought in this OTO, a vein to the tool. Which again, these are the interesting individuals running the Tool Society who kind of appointed Hitler, right, as the essentially what they viewed as the second coming in many ways of this ancient Germanic Volkish. What was the name? The Ubermensch, right?
Yeah,
And
the Ubermensch, right?
yeah, but the really what's most important is that Hitler reported this incident of hearing the voice, which got a lot of attention when he narrowly escaped death from a French artillery shell. And this is when he says
Wait, he
that,
said that the voice is how he narrowly
yeah,
escaped
man,
death
said
from.
it saved his
Wow.
life.
So
Yeah.
it tipped him off.
In 1914, he says he was eating his dinner in a trench with several comrades, and suddenly a voice seemed to be saying to me, "Get up and go over there." It was so clear and insistent that I obeyed automatically as if it has been a military order.
Whoa.
I rose at once to my feet and walked 20 meters along the trench, carrying my dinner can with me. Then I sat down to go on eating, my mind once more at rest. Hardly had I done so when a flash and defining report came from the part of the trench I had just left. A stray shell had burst over the group in which I had been sitting, and every member of it was killed.
Damn, this motherfucker had aura, bro. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Think about this shit. Look, I get all the. I know I'm fighting back against the Hitler was base shit, but this motherfucker
He
dressed
did.
in Hugo Boss, wearing a cape, and having divine intervention caused him to narrowly escape artillery shells. Like that
Right.
motherfucker was a pimp.
Oh,
Also, he
chrome-
sold booty and did meth, but
He put the chrome on the Bentley. Kidding me?
That's
Come on,
it,
dude.
man.
Right,
Dang.
put the chrome on the Benz, man.
Put the
This is
chrome
an
on the
interesting
Benz.
question. David Moore says, "How do you know any voice is divine?" It's
Test
yeah,
the spirits.
there he goes.
There's a
He keeps misusing the word divine. Yes, astute observation, David
you
Moore.
can.
I just
so
be
if you-
saying shit.
If you read the Bible, you could. I forget the scripture. I need to memorize it because I refer to it so often. But it says, when you are approached by these things, which you eventually will be, everybody listening in this audience, as we move into the this crazy time where the thinny gets thinner, I have a feeling we're all going to have some sort of interactions with this. But you're allowed to test the spirits. There are rules on the other side of this realm that they must abide by, which make no sense to us, but apparently makes a lot of sense to them there. That's the vampire rule. There must be
Well,
consent.
to David Moore's point, I don't know. I can't even struggle. I can't call it supernatural either because there's that voice to skull technology, and you could project. So I don't know what to call it, which is why I'm just saying divine. So relax.
Well, I mean, it
Chill.
is. It's like we were. people were kind of jumping down our throats a little bit about this stuff, but we discussed it on the previous episode, like just an hour ago. There are people doing, weird sacrifices, sacrificing chickens to entities that are probably demonic. The shit works. It works,
Yeah.
dog. I wouldn't suggest that you do it because
Mhm.
there's a price to pay at the end of it. But
Yeah.
divine, I don't know if that's the right word. Powerful.
Yeah, I don't know what I'd
certain.
call it.
Does it
but
work? Yeah, you could take over all of Europe if you
Right.
listen to this
does it
thing.
work?
But then you'll end up being in the Kanye West song years later. So it's
Yeah, he says maybe spectral, but even spectral is like there are instances where it's not, right? Like they figured out how to emit frequencies into your mind,
does
with
divine
a
mean?
voice to God technology, like, and that I wouldn't call that spectral. So, but yeah, I get
No.
what you're saying. But
And the
I love
occult-
that though. Whatever it is it
No, that's
strong?
the
Yeah,
correct
you can
word.
take over Europe.
So divine is as an adjective relating to God, gods, or supreme being, sacred or
Mm.
holy. So these entities are technically a classification
Lowercase
of
g gods.
Elohim. Yeah, they're
Mhm.
Elohim. God is Elohim, but according to what we believe, the supreme Elohim at the top, there's a pyramid
Hierarchy.
scheme. Yeah, hierarchy on this. So they are lower on the totem pole, but certainly divine, certainly gods. Don't
Mhm.
worship them. They're gonna ask you to, and then screw your.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Yeah, and I think it was David Berkowitz. He was a member of the Divine 22 Disciples of Hell,
Mhm.
who were basically, that was the group who were kind of like the local chapter of the Process Church, the Final Judgment, this cult organization in upstate New York. And yeah, they were convening in Untermeyer Park and going to this location called the Devil's Cave that has since been filled in. I think obviously there was much evidence to various mass graves, right? That he had been tipped off, Detective James Rothstein, by a criminal informant. He was tipped off and essentially went down there, discovered a mass grave of Alsatian German Shepherd dogs, right?
Wow.
And by the way, that was a technique utilized in the SS, right? Where they would basically give you a puppy, a German Shepherd Alsatian puppy, and then have you raise the puppy. And essentially, as a loyalty test, you would then be forced to kill the puppy, right? Or the dog whenever it grows to a certain, or when you're at that certain stage of the process, right? Of your initiation, essentially. But
Yeah, they
still,
actually showed that in the film Kingsman, where they were raising an elite, kind of British intelligence group, and yeah, they were all given
This
dogs.
is
And they
like
had to kill them.
This is ancient though. Like Babylonian armies would do the same thing.
Mm.
It's just it's like a good show of loyalty as well.
Yes.
Yeah. And conditioning of subservience, as well, right? Like it's
Mhm.
very much psychological. It's really a psychological operation of mind control techniques is what you're essentially pursuing. And but still, you consider the fact that all of those deaths surrounding the Son of Sam murders that were happening, they were happening around these various occult holidays outside of these symbolically occult, venues, right? I forget what the name of the club was, but where one of the murders took place, but it had direct occult connotation
Mm.
to the organization. And so, and then also the deaths were happening and murders surrounding like Valentine's Day, knowingly an occult holiday. And that was kind of what the way that they viewed it was essentially in the way it was kind of described was that they almost viewed it as, and again, this is Maury Terry's kind of perspective from the ultimate evil, but it really was the ultimate, right? That was being presented as far as they were basically claiming that there's power to harness through the subconscious mind's initiation into the practice, whether they are aware of it or not isn't the point,
Mm.
but they will subconsciously embrace this ritual, whether they know it or not, just based on essentially, being exposed to it by the media, in this way. So it essentially it's like this. It was very interesting as far as their psychology of how they were kind of interpreting the harnessing the power of the ritual itself. But then, of course, you have the layered approach of not only harnessing the alleged power coming from right the blood ritual
Mm.
and the to a certain entity, which David Berkowitz himself said were multiple entities, Moloch being one of them, right? And yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
he claims that obviously he was not acting alone, and he was only a part of a few of the killings themselves. And actually, there was a van positioned right outside where the deaths were happening, with a tripod set up, where they were actually filming it for snuff film purposes, obviously. But the crazy part about Hitler's time at Payswalk is that essentially he was allegedly temporarily blinded after a mustard gas attack, right? And this is when he's hospitalized at Payswalk. And so it gets crazy, because essentially he admits to having experienced these visions and hearing a voice from another world, during which he was told that he would need to restore his sight so that he could lead Germany back to glory. The voice insisted that Hitler had been chosen by Providence again,
Mm-hmm.
and had been given a divine mission. There we go. So that's why he named it Providence in the first place. So Hitler was destined to establish a new social order, a new Reich, which would be established under his leadership. Now, John Toland, the historian, in Hitler's biography, there's a cliff note, right? There's a footnote about Hitler potentially being hypnotized. And it says, according to a U.S. Navy intelligence report, which was declassified in 1973, and written by Austrian nerve specialist Karl Kroner, who was working when Hitler was treated in Payswalk, the consulting psychiatrist Edmund Forster concluded that Hitler's condition was hysterical blindness. Whatever treatment
Hysterical blindness.
hysterical blindness.
It's weird.
I know.
So
So
just think
whatever,
like blindness by mustard gas is I don't know that I would call that hysterical. That's a fascinating word to use there.
it's definitely strange.
Huh.
But he says
What the hell
that
does that mean? Yeah.
I don't know.
I
Yeah,
know.
search it up. Hysterical blindness. The motherfucker was just
Right.
like so crazy he went blind. Is
But this psychiatrist Edmund Forster is the one who gets his he essentially gets murdered when the Nazis come back to Vienna, right? Where he
yeah,
was
because
elected.
Hitler
Yeah,
comes in, he's
man.
like, "Oh, you thought my blindness was funny? You."
And
It's
they
like
pull
you're
all
saying-
the psychiatric records were all destroyed.
Holy shit!
Yeah,
You're
dude.
saying it's a psychological blindness. So something that you cause yourself. No physical external damage has been done to you. It's just
So on
That's
one hand,
crazy.
it's the mustard gas, but then when he gets a diagnosis, it's bitch, you're making it up. Like it's you did this to
Yeah.
yourself type of shit. And then Hitler comes back and he's like, "You."
I heard a
He
voice,
kills him.
bitch. Yeah.
That's crazy. Now who's blind? They rip his eyes out. Man, that's it is insane to me that everything you're laying out here right now, Austin, is
Mhm.
not part of this conversation that's being had constantly. It's not
Right.
like there's only a few people talking about Hitler in obscure corners of the internet. This is a
Mhm.
dialogue that's happening at the highest levels on our social media accounts. And this, what you're describing, is not part of the conversation whatsoever, which is
No.
actually why I stopped watching Europa, because I kind of found it a little bit uninteresting, but it felt like they were leaving out so much. It
There's
felt
too
like
much.
damage control on
There's-
behalf of Hitler.
There's too much here. Like I said a while ago, I was talking with Stu Peters about this, and I was like, actually, like there's some evidence that Hitler was in contact with certain entities and might have been influenced by them to do. And he's like, there's no that rhetoric, there's no this and that. And I'm like, there's a lot of shit out there, dude. And like this is just like maybe the fourth sector of evidence that we have that kind of
that
point at
suggests
this.
that. Yep.
Yeah,
And
it's
I
like-
love that too, that dismissal of anything that besmirches him as rhetoric.
Yeah.
That's clever. That's a good move. I literally say that when like if my wife says, other husbands do the dishes, I go rhetoric.
That's rhetoric, dog.
Don't say that around here. Yeah.
Then I,
Like,
then
that
I
is
circumcise
it's
my
so
wife.
effective. It's so
Right.
effective as dismissing shit.
But that's what makes sense to me as far as how the protocols of the learned elders has been entirely dismissed, as being the most right literature that's ever been presented to the public, when in reality the individuals who actually allegedly debunked the protocols was the Times of London, which were owned by the Rothschilds, right? And so it's like if you can draw those lines directly, then you can kind of see how the deception is perfectly employed upon the public, and then how you could easily conflate, right, this misconception and propaganda based on around Hitler,
Yeah.
just kind of allowing the public to then utilize that to easily dismiss these alternative theories. But
Austin, the details about the hearing the voices, are these only things that are um talked about inside his sister-in-law's tell-all type of deal?
no, man, it's been referred to by John Toland, the actual biographer, Hitler's biographer and historian. You know, it's been referred to as far as the Payswalk incident, in many, at least many different places have actually at least referenced it. But
Hmm.
typically, it's just in passing, and they'll only mention the fact that he was in a mustard gas attack, and they'll kind of use it to only provide more of the lore around the rise of Hitler himself and how he became larger than life, this Ubermensch,
Yeah.
Germanic god, king, because essentially it was like this gave him that kind of mythical lore that he needed for the German people to embrace as being a potential reality, as far as like this is a divine path that we've been put on, and this man is our representative. And also consider, if you're conditioned at that level, and then I mean, you listen to some of the translated speeches, you're like, holy shit,
Yeah.
like he's speaking the truth in some
Yes.
in many ways, you know what I mean? And he is at the very least, um, you know, tapping into this very just like core emotional state
Hmm.
of the German people at the time, where they are just desperate for
Yes.
something, some
That's
way
one of
out
the
of
things
this. Yeah.
I tell people is like, along with Europa and how Europa does feel like damage control, it feels like a piece of propaganda, in very many ways, because the way that they paint him was like this superstar. And it's like, I happen to know people and we're all fallible, sinning retards. So I'm not going to buy that.
Right.
Um, but it's I don't know, it's a strange thing because as it continues to go on, I mean, I think personally where we're sitting right now, all of the sentiment that's surrounding the narrative of Hitler, I f- it comes straight from that documentary. It
Hmm.
comes straight from that because I know people, and I know that we'll do the bare minimum, and because of that, like I know myself, the bare minimum for me is watching Europa with my Patreon. That's the bare minimum for me. That's the bare minimum research. And I know that is people have a proclivity to go in that direction. So most of the rhetoric that's surrounding this narrative comes from that film.
Right.
It's
Yeah. And
interesting too. Like, sorry, I'm just thinking about
yeah, you're
Hitler
fine.
and this idea, this like temporary blindness, because I'm thinking about the Bible as well. You had Saul, who also went temporarily blind and then had this
Yep.
That's it. Yep.
And then
supernatural, like,
transition to Paul, right? That was
yeah,
after the yeah.
he had a spiritual awakening. He went from killing Christians to now his life mission was
Yeah.
something completely different. Hitler did the same shit, right? He was just
Mhm.
angry, and then he decided this is what's gonna make me
Yeah.
like gain political power. So like there's something, I'm not saying it's like it's obviously a one for one, but there's something about blindness or taking somebody's senses away, making them have to
Right.
deal with their life, or I don't know. That this is kind of
Well,
weird.
that's what I was getting at, was like, I don't necessarily, just because I say that Europa was propaganda, any
Mhm.
good lie is covered in the truth, right? So he was addressing, as far as I can see, like real issues with this Bolshevik subversion, this Weimar conditions, sowing of dissent and creating revolutions and shit, like destabilizing everything. There was real efforts by a small group of Jews, Trotsky and whoever the else, to
Right.
subvert that entire country, and then fill it with immoral sort of sexual deviance and all that crap. So a lot of like what gives that notion Weimar conditions, and they apply it to today, is because we're seeing a lot of the same shit. We're seeing people, and we're seeing debaucherous, pornography, sexual, all the
Right.
crap that plagued Weimar is now plaguing us. So I do think that he was coming from a place where he was addressing the reason that it resonated is because that was true.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And by the way, you have Hitler and Stalin, right? They're British agents trained at Tavistock at the time, allegedly. And Leon Trotsky and Sigmund Freud were also among their group in Vienna, apparently just post World War One. So that really, stuck out to me, obviously, because you have this kind of like intersection between all the usual suspects that were about to be presented to the world, in this just false power paradigm that would get everybody to kind of fall into place for this world conflict. But again, I just think the fact alone that you have Sigmund Freud and Leon Trotsky and Stalin all hanging out in Vienna with Hitler while he's allegedly being programmed at the Tavistock Institute, that alone, come on, man, like
That tells you
that's a little bit
everything.
ridiculous. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's it's all theater. The way that so the actors go behind the curtains and they commiserate, and then when they open the curtains, they're enemies. It's this
right.
it's right there, right in front of you.
Exactly. And they were allegedly hanging out at the same restaurant, which I didn't realize that was a part of all of this. But apparently, they were just Stalin, Trotsky, and Freud, who were all hanging with Hitler at these various bars and restaurants. And so that alone, it's like seeing Kamala go and fist bump. Yeah, right. And they
Yeah,
pull their
that's
masks
exactly
down.
right.
They think the cameras are off, and yeah, the political theater stops for a brief moment, and we catch a real window
Yeah.
into how power is structured. And the political puppets are kind of leveraged against us, right, in every
Mhm.
single way. And that is why, like, it's so hilarious to actually see people under this misconception and false impression that these politicians are even aware of the policies that they push forward and the legislation that they attempt to enact. Like, you've seen so many different examples of them just being questioned, just for right, asked to explain the really just the core fundamental proponents of the bill itself, and they have absolutely no understanding
Yes.
whatsoever because they haven't even read it.
Yeah,
You know,
because
and
that was what they signed up for, is an understanding that this is theater and this isn't like, I gotta do my research. You want me to read this bill? Like, no, I thought I just
right,
put this suit on and we manipulate the masses, right? Bread and circus. That's what we
exactly.
do. That's like all of this shit comes from, well, I'm sure it comes from Babylon, but
What do
Greece
you
was
sorry, what do you think about the latest development of Trump falling away from Netanyahu? Because it's like, is this more political theater, or is this like moving towards something else? What's your opinion on it?
I think that the goals have been accomplished. The cleansing it's been given the green light. They're on their final stages. They already have admitted to the fact that they're, implementing policies of starvation for the remaining Palestinians to push them into this final territory in this final area to effectively cleanse the rest of the region itself, and the occupation will be entirely successful in their terms. And so I think that it's definitely political theater because they've Trump gave them every last thing that they could ever imagine, have desired. And as far as, like, let alone you just mentioned Miriam Adelson giving him 100, right, just a shitload of money for moving the embassy and his Israel policy. I think that, again, optics, they know what's at stake, and so they know how bad it's looked. And I think that at a certain point, once you strategically and tactically have provided the role necessary to accomplish what their end goal truly was, then why wouldn't you separate yourself from obviously Netanyahu's doomed to fail. Like, he hasn't been as far as just like overall popular support in
mm,
Israel. He has none, and he
Yeah.
hasn't had any real political capital except for, uh, you know, the um, the Likud party, right? And obviously their strategic special interests that they've kind of the reason I think that he was brought back and kept from going to prison and put back into place politically was so they could hang him right, at least, like, by the stake at the end of all of this, as, oh, Netanyahu, now we have a head that will roll in
yeah.
a way that will have the public at least feel as if accountability took place when it so in my mind, I already view Israel in the kind of the overarching like geopolitical framework of the chess match. I view Israel as basically being a tool to provide the foundation and fundamental framework for the really the one world government, the new world order. I do believe that, as much as people like to conveniently laugh off and dismiss that term, new world order, we're talking about an international global framework where no longer do domestic uh, political puppets matter as much, and it will very much kind of transcend into this overarching what looks as if the totalitarian technocratic state that is being developed. And I think that you look at all the individuals standing tall, the special interest groups standing tall behind Trump, the Peter Thiels of the world, right? The Van Driesens, right, with the AI government infrastructure attempting to be put into place. We are witnessing the pivot to the totalitarian technocratic state, and I think that in itself is a huge victory for the obviously the bureaucratic oligarchy that has been in at least has just been in power for far too long and have for generations kind of attempted to construct this very outcome. And I think that it's kind of ahead of schedule. And so I really do think that, and I hate that, again, a lot of people view this as potentially a black pill, but it's not. I just think that
No,
we
you're
have
just
to.
pointing out what people have seen coming for a long time. Like, it doesn't matter what lens you look at this. We tend to look at things through a Christian worldview, but let's take like somebody that schizos are more fond of. Alex Jones has been talking about the coming new world order, the consolidation of government, the consolidation of currency for the longest time. This has been something that's been well on its way. I think that where we're sitting at right now is fulfillment of prophecy that talks about the world turning its back on the Jews. And
Yeah.
I said that was coming for a while, and people would say, how could that be coming if Donald Trump is so balls deep in the Jews' butts?
Yeah.
And I said, I don't know, but give it some time, and I bet you that's going to change. And here we are. So I don't know if I'm not saying that like somebody in the chat, I think it was the John Black said that Trump can't make it so obvious that he's
Mhm.
not a Israeli bootlicker.
Yeah.
Could be that, but it also could be that we are in this massive cultural shift, and if it is that, in as it applies to prophecy, then I expect to see, if we are on that timeline, um, something gigantic happen and for the
Right.
world to shift. And right now we are primed to shift. Like,
Mhm.
we've got the kindling. It's all set up, right? We've got a tinderbox ready to go. We just need boom, that big spark, and something's going to happen. We're all going to turn on Israel. So
Oh yeah.
and you talk about how when you're doing these parapolitical investigations, you keep bumping up against this supernatural, backdrop. And I think it is um worth considering then that is something that the Bible talks about, where the world will turn its back on Israel.
Yeah, and I do think that you have really just bad state actors, who have evil intentions, who are kind of utilizing a manufactured false prophecy for their own benefit. And I think that, as much as, you know, I'm not attempting to undermine, obviously the scripture itself, I think, has just been far too often misinterpreted by individuals who wanted to exploit it and utilize it for their own
Mm.
personal gain. And so, understanding that, and then realizing, just from my own personal experience, like seeing members of my family who grew up as I did, basically, fundamentally, we were Christian Zionists in a way, right? And it was
Mm.
just because I was a Southern Baptist, and it had been overly infiltrated by this kind of newly, well, really, what became what was the name of the Bible that essentially
Schofield.
reconstruct, yeah, the Schofield, yeah, that essentially kind of hijacked the really just the Christian ideological perspective throughout the Beltway in the
Mm.
US. And I witnessed that myself personally, just seeing how the state of Israel in its modern form became a symbol of God. And it's just like, man, I view, just philosophically, how I view the state and government in general, man, it is fundamentally in opposition
Yeah.
to the divine path in my mind. And I will never view government as God ever in my life. And I don't view government being a tool that that God would utilize for our ultimate benefit and positive gain. I honestly, I just can't see that as a reality that we're facing, especially
I've been
realizing. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was just gonna say I've been
You got it.
struggling with that because as I'm going through the Bible, I realize like God did anoint kings. He did place basically people at head of governments. But I also recognize that we're at this time in history where I don't know if it's just the amount of people that we have, but these institutions, you know, Catholicism, Christianity, at the highest levels, they've been well, not the highest levels because the highest level is God, but certainly within our physical realm, they've been corrupted massively. Like
Absolutely.
I consider myself a Christian, but I just can't. Every time I go to a church, it's like I'm like, what the fuck are these people doing? What are we talking about here? Why is this?
Mhm.
You know, like if to me it feels like if you could corral that many people together, then you can flip a whole church and flip that many people. You know, so this idea of like Christian Zionism, it's like, what even the fuck is that? That's not even a thing. You know, we've been talking about it for a while. Top's been screaming that they're inherently in opposition to one another,
Yeah, this
and
is
that
why
and
there's a guy in your chat. Seems like a lot of fun at parties. It's I just can't break down. I can't break down like months of me screaming logically and mathematically of why these things are not compatible. But right
Mhm.
there, what you just explained is that it's like they are incompatible. And when you start to get into the theology of what they actually believe and what they practice and what they read and what they do, they're not. I don't even like. I'm at the assumption that they're possibly not even worship. Not possibly. I don't think they're not worshiping the same God. They are. They have fallen back into their ways. That the
Wow.
symbol of the Star of David is not even the Star of David. That is something that they picked up like 500 years ago, and it's
Mhm.
it's a as above so below sort of thing. But it's supposed to represent. It has 6 points, so it represents the not the order of man, but the spiritual order, which they are then
Mhm.
trying to encompass and say that they have control over. And then you pair that with the Talmud, a book of arguments about how we're going to derive our law against the spiritual order. Within it, they'll even tell you that they have fooled God and told and God has said, "Wow, yeah, I didn't see it that way." This kind of shit. Like these people are out of their minds.
And
So
that narrative happens where people are like, "Oh, but all the Abrahamic religions worship the same God." But in John
nah, dog.
2:23, it
Mhm.
says, "Whoever denies the Son does not have the Father."
Hmm.
Right? Like that's it. That's it. And they don't believe that Christ was the Messiah. So full stop. That's it. Read the verse, doggy. You don't have that in you. If you don't,
Yeah.
whoever denies the Son denies the Father. So
And it's like
I don't
again,
know.
but that's just from the Bible side. But just take a look at what's going on here. Does it look like this is the same religion? They've cleverly attached themselves to the religion, but they hate Christians. They
Yeah.
spit on them in their country. Their entire doctrine is sneakily against Christians. So it's like this is not the same thing, but the
They
branding
keep
is
being
brilliant.
espoused as it is.
Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson. These are people that I'm like battering against because they have they're continually tying themselves to Christianity, the Babylon Bee. These you're
Mhm.
not the same thing. You can keep saying that, but you're not. You can call me, but I'm looking at this. The fact that think about this. This is even a crazier thought that I've been thinking about often. If somebody goes from Judaism to Christianity, they have accepted something new. This is
Mhm.
like an addition. This plus I'm on, Judaism plus that turns into
Judaism
Christianity.
Plus. It's like Disney
If
Plus.
yeah, now you have a great streaming service. If you go from Christianity to Judaism, you have renounced. You're taking something away. There's something very specific about that. It's like
Mhm.
these two things don't work.
Mm,
No.
They don't work at all together tangentially in the same country. Clearly in the same country they don't work. Look around you.
right.
Look
Right.
around you. It's but whatever. There's another argument that I've
Listen
gone hours.
to there is a, honestly, I found this very interesting, kind of breakdown by David Livingstone that really put into terms what they were utilizing this ideological subversion for at the time and calling it Russian roulette. I found it very interesting because they basically put into terms how they were leveraging Marxism and capitalism and let's say Bolshevism and Zionism, all for their own, really what amounted to they had a strategic outcome in mind in terms of the ideological subversion in place. And this is fascinating stuff because it really kind of perfectly outlines what was happening, because Winston Churchill even said, in terms of this article that he wrote called Zionism versus Bolshevism, a struggle for the soul of the people.
Hmm.
And I found it very interesting because he goes on to attribute these upheavals to those he referred to as international Jews. And so he notes first that there can be no greater mistake than to attribute to each individual a recognizable share in the qualities which make up the national character. And then he goes on to describe the character of what he categorizes as Bible believing Jews, national Jews. And lastly, he says, in violent opposition to all this fear of effort rise the schemes of the international Jews. The adherents of this sinister confederacy are mostly men reared up among the unhappy populations of countries where Jews are persecuted on account of their race. Most, if not all, have forsaken the faith of their forefathers and divorced from their minds all spiritual hopes of the next world. This movement among the Jews is not new. From the days of Spartacus Weishaupt, founder of the Illuminati, Karl Marx, Trotsky, Bela Kuhn, Rosa Luxemburg, and Emma Goldman, this world conspiracy has been steadily growing. This is Churchill, man. This conspiracy played a definite, recognizable role in the tragedy of the French Revolution. It played as a modern writer, right, as far as just this recognizable part in the tragedy of the French Revolution and this subversive movement during the 19th century, essentially. And this is where I found it most interesting, because you had this message about Marxism, right, being the antithesis of capitalism. This is so crazy because Otto Kahn, partner of Jacob Schiff and Paul and Felix Warburg and Kuhnloeb and Company, which helped finance the regime, really both sides of the conflict, honestly. And so it says, you say that Marxism is the very antithesis of capitalism, which is equally sacred to us. It is precisely for this reason that they are direct opposites to one another, that they put into our hands the two poles of this planet and allow us to be its axis. These two contraries, like Bolshevism and ourselves, find their identity in the international. These opposites, which are at the antipodes to one another in society and in their doctrines, meet again in the identity of their purpose and end, the remaking of the world from above by the control of riches, and from below by revolution. Our mission consists in promulgating the new law and in creating a God. That is to say, in purifying the idea of God and realizing it when the time shall come. We shall purify the idea by identifying it with the nation of Israel, which has become its own Messiah. The advent of it will be facilitated by the final triumph of Israel, which has become its own Messiah. And I found that like one of the most fascinating things ever, as far as the Comte de Saint Hilaire.
Can you send me that, please?
Yeah, I'll send it to you right now.
Wow.
Yeah, it blew me away, brother. This whole thing's called Operation Trust by David Livingstone. He put together this amazing I almost put it in the regular chat. But he put together this amazing like set of resources and different quotes and interesting tie-ins to obviously. And I think actually William Ramsey just had this guy on, David Livingstone. He would be an awesome person to have a conversation with, because he again, like the intersection between kind of this spiritual occultism that's being utilized and leveraged against us, but also he's kind of providing all the receipts in terms of right how they implemented this ideological deception in the first place, and kind of what their ultimate goals were and truly have been from day one. He has another series of articles that describes the foundation of America as a Rosicrucian mission, and he elaborates on that at a level that very much convinced me that it's entirely potentially the reality we're residing in, and so yeah. Anyway, Sorry I
Uh,
came on and didn't talk about Waco at all, boys.
I
but
don't
Oh,
give a shit
yeah.
about that, Austin. This was a banger of a conversation.
Yeah.
yeah, buddy.
And I'm
Unfortunately,
totally happy with David
you
Koresh. Those
signed
kids, they deserve
yourself
to die.
you signed yourself
Oh
up
my
for
god.
another episode at this point. Sorry, Austin.
Hey,
You
man.
you you've
Oh my
came on,
god.
we got very distracted. We did
Yes.
something different, and now you have to
Right.
come back.
Hey,
Now you
I'm
have to come
down.
back.
That's
Yeah.
perfectly fine.
Well,
I really did. I was perfectly prepared to discuss the Koresh's visions when he went to Israel in '85, and like I had a lot that we were going to discuss in terms of that. So, but hey, I feel like this was some sort of a constructive conversation, and
no,
I
it
had a
was
good time
huge
anyway.
because we find that we have these like running theories and we actively research like on the show. The best way that I learn is through conversation. And so oftentimes we'll have this thing happen where somebody will bring unexpectedly a piece of the puzzle that we didn't know we were missing. And specifically that speaking to Providence and having that voice basically tell Hitler when it's time to move and when it's not time to move, and everything that that
Mhm.
spiraled into was huge. Was huge. We actually just had a bit of the same thing happen on the last episode. It's a good day for figuring shit out, man. And so I'm pumped that you came, and I'm pumped that we didn't talk about the Davidians at all. This was so much
Thanks,
better.
man.
So, but I do have to get the hell out of here. So, Austin,
Sounds good.
number one, thank you, brother. And number two, where the hell can people find you?
All right, man. And you guys already know nothing but love and respect. And every time we have the opportunity to have a conversation, man, I'm very excited because again, like what you guys are doing, it's not appreciated enough, right? Like honestly, you are driving culture. It's hilarious to watch, and like
Right
people,
off a cliff.
which hey, it's kind of where it deserves to be at this
Drunk
point, right?
driving
Exactly.
drunk driving the culture. I think Jose
Yeah,
said
this
that on
culture
Power Game.
deserves to be destroyed, and we're just the people to do it.
Yes.
Perfect. I love it so
Yeah.
much. But again, so nothing but admiration, for you both. But again, you guys know where to find me at the Underclass Podcast. Yeah. Oh my God, I was dying. So the honestly, I legitimately wrote down Ye's verse like, earlier. Yeah, I swear to God. But
That's
anyway,
hilarious.
so so yeah, you guys, if you anything I've ever done resonates with you, you can support me at patreon.com/the underclass podcast. There's an incentive there for the paywalled show with Brad Binkley and Sam Tripoli called Whatever This Is. It's been a lot of fun, and then on Tuesdays, yeah, Already Dead, 9:30 Eastern time with Jose and Jules, and we always have a good time there. So all right, guys, I'll come back and we'll have another conversation here in the very near future, but nothing
Well,
but love.
you and Tripoli and Binkley, I believe, are all going to be at Bohemian Grove.
Yeah,
So whatever we
Binkley's
don't
gonna be
hash out here, we're
performing.
going to end up hashing out on stage. So
There's so many
Awesome.
people that
Excited.
Binkley's opening up for Tripoli. I never mentioned it. So
Dude, Brad's been killing it actually. Like he's trying to do stand up himself, and I think he's doing a pretty damn good job. So I've been it's been so surreal having a show with Sam. Like it's been just one of the honestly, man, I never expect I've mentioned this before, but I am overwhelmingly grateful, and I never in my life expected to have a show with Sam, even though I'm it's like obviously that was a dream, you know what I
right.
mean? But still, it's just like I don't know. It's kind of hilarious where we find ourselves in this moment, but I think just through objectively pursuing that truth and being willing to be wrong and have an open mind and reflect on our ideas and admit when we have made mistakes, like there, it's very obvious that we're finding like-minded individuals
Mhm.
who are proactively pursuing a life where they practice their principles on a daily basis, and that's why I love you too as well, man. So thank
You
you.
know,
You know.
sometimes it feels like we talk about how the culture's all headed in a certain direction, and maybe that direction is negative, but there's also something that's happening within it, which is this thing, and it's like we are among like-minded peers more than we've ever certainly more than I've ever been in my life.
it's
And
been it's been something. Sorry to cut you off because
no,
like I feel like I'm at like the very heart of this. Like this started with I just saw Jose 6 years ago and Clint when he was like, I don't know, 1,000 followers and a
Wow.
anonymous picture. And I was like, I think these guys have something and I like
mhm,
what they're doing and I'm going to attach myself to this. And then it builds this community. the community starts out of like libertarianism, then it turns into racist comedy, then it turns into conspiracy and parapolitical conspiracy. And the people that have been added on to this, just the people on your show, you said you, Jose, he's been there since the beginning, Jules, David, these are like new people that are coming in. There's a, conspiracy extremists, you have not nice guy, all the people that are floating around in our, I'm gonna forget all the names. It's beautiful to watch. And like doing Bohemian Grove, it's fun to do, it's stressful, but like when the people are all there together and they're all like, I'm gonna have to learn everyone's faces again. It's gonna be a little different because I see your screen names, but it's just cool. Like it's like, all right, you guys are here now. These are my friends. These are the people that think how I think, and they bothered to show up to this place. We're gonna try to put on as good of a show for you guys as possible, entertain you, but like just the hang, to be around people that like I'm not the only one that's this crazy.
Yeah, you're not supposed to be able to
Oh
do
my
this.
God. Dude, I
We're not
felt
supposed
so
to be able to do
isolated,
this.
brother. Before I started my show and 2 years ago, April of 2023, that's how new this all is to me as well. But yeah, I started it because I couldn't take being so isolated in my own ideas anymore. It was like I was just like I was kind of spiraling off the planet in a way.
Yeah.
And all I desired most in the world was to find myself within a like-minded community that were pursuing a path that I viewed as worthwhile and in a
Find
passionate
homies
way.
to talk crazy shit with.
100%,
And
man.
like, no matter what comes of this, I have been blessed in that way, like exponentially. I now have so many homies to talk crazy shit with, and it's fantastic. And so even if nothing comes of it, but just the same way that culture is moving and it's mysterious, and I'm looking at it and going, how is this happening? Why is everybody going that way? I'm also
Right.
looking at this community and being like, this isn't even us. Like, how is this happening? How are we all coming together? And why is this blowing up the way that it is? But
Right.
I'm happy that it is, man. And I'm happy
Same.
that you're a part of it. So let's bring it in for a landing because I got some shit to do. Top, is
yeah.
that it? Are we done here?
I mean, we're never done. We could talk to Austin forever, but yeah, I guess if you got to go, David, if you're the one that's got to go, right? You wrote in the chat,
Well,
I
listen.
got to go at 4, so it's like, all right, fine, then we'll cut it short. No, it's fine, David, it's fine.
Listen.
It's
No,
fine.
listen.
The greatest hypnotist on planet Earth is a oblong box in the corner of the room. It is constantly telling us what to believe is real.
You can persuade people that what they see with their eyes is what there is to see. You can't. Because they'll